So the first thing I watched was Knives Out, A Glass Onion Story. I think that's the title of it. Watched an early screening before it comes out on Netflix next month. I was not impressed. I 100% think that the first one was better. I mean, we can all make fun of the donut monologue at the end. That was not good writing. But in terms of everything else, I think it was a really tight story. And it made more sense to me. When you watch this film, everything is much bigger, much more cinematic. But I think the cast of characters are a little one note, not as interesting. I think the performances were great. Everyone did a great job. Janelle Monáe's great. Jessica Henwick, I love her. Like, ever since I saw her in The Matrix, I was like, this is my girl, and she's great. Everyone was really great, but I didn't really feel any connection to any of the people. And then when the twist came, I was like, are you serious? Like, I was really in my seat. Like, is anyone else buying this? And the theater was pretty packed, and everyone was so into it. Like, I was like, this is the twist. Like, this is the twist for real. I was like, I'm so done with it. I'm so done with this movie. So it just did not hit for me at all. In terms of like the actual story of it, the mystery of it just didn't hit at all. But people really like it. So I guess, again, I'm in the minority. It's okay. I'm used to being alone. So that's fine. And then I watched Wednesday, which is a new Netflix show starring Jenna Ortega, the Tim Burton Wednesday joint. Loved that show. Binged it in like a couple of days. It's so good. Jenna Ortega is so good in the role. She's another one of those young actors who I'm looking at, and I'm like, she's going to do really good things because she's very smart, and how she attacked the role was just like, it was great. It was a really fun show. I love the gothic kind of the things that Tim Burton does best. Like, he really like showed up in this show. It was really good. Highly encourage everyone to watch it. And then I watched Bones and All. Bones and All is a Luca Guadagnino film starring Taylor Russell and Timothée Chalamet and Mark Rylance. And honestly, when I heard about the premise of it, I was like, I don't know what that's going to do, because it's about a cannibal. So it's about two cannibals and like them falling in love. And I was like, oh, okay, that's interesting. But it was like so sweet and like so cute. Like, Taylor Russell is adorable. She's older than me, but she's so adorable to me. Like, she's just the cutest girl. And like the vibe, I think someone described it as like Call Me By Your Name and Suspiria, but it didn't really feel like Call Me By Your Name to me. It felt like, I don't really know. I can't put my finger on like what this exactly felt like, because there is like body horror elements of it because it focuses around two cannibals. But it was almost like a road trip type of two kids who don't know who they are, and they figure out who they are in the relationship of them kind of coming to terms with their feelings for each other, but also coming to terms like understanding this desire to want to eat people. So the gory elements weren't even that gory to me. Maybe because I like, after watching Crimes of Future, honestly, I don't feel anything when it comes to body horror. I'm just like, okay, whatever. Like, that was probably the worst thing I've ever seen. Not in terms of like the actual movie, but just like how
gruesome and grisly.
Yeah, disturbing it felt. I was like, ah. And then watching Titan, after those movies, like, I'm cool. I'm cool. Whatever happens, I'm cool. So like, that stuff didn't even faze me. It maybe it fazed other people, but it did not faze me at all. And there's not too much of it in there as like a shocking type of thing. I mean, the first scene is kind of shocking, and I was like, girl, how are you going to get away with this one? But overall, it was just about these two characters falling in love in like the 80s. And it was really sweet. It didn't impact me the way Call Me By Your Name did. Like, I after I watched Call Me By Your Name, I did not stop thinking about that movie for like weeks. And it was also because it made me kind of uncomfortable, like the age dynamic and just the lustfulness of like these two characters being like totally obsessed with each other. Like, that was a little like, I don't know how I feel about that. But in this film, there wasn't a lot of that in there in terms of like sexual whatever. Like there wasn't a lot of that in there. So it was really about like these two people just finding themselves and then falling in love with each other, which I really liked. It's a really good film. It was shot, oh God, it's shot beautifully. Like Luca just knows how to make things look really good. Everything he does, even if you don't like the movie overall, like you can't say that the cinematography wasn't dope, because it was. Like it looked incredible. And the cinematographer and the editor are like young. They're like 26, 27, and they're working on this movie. Loved that. Loved that there's a black lead in the movie. Loved that as well. And that there are black people in this movie and it doesn't feel weird or like they're trying to make a point about diversity. Like it's just in there, which I really respected. Yeah, it's a good movie. Like it's a really good movie. And I think that that's kind of expected. Like most of his stuff is really good. I don't think people were into the HBO series, and I understand why, because he set up a lot of good things, but there was no follow through with his setups in that show. So it was kind of hard to watch because you didn't really understand people's motivations. There were no real payoffs. Everything was too ambiguous. And in this movie, it seems like he very much corrects that, because I think when he has material to work from, because this is based off of a novel, he does a lot better when he has that. And Suspiria there was already an original Suspiria, so he just recreated that. Yeah, he does better when he has material. When he's writing something organically, it doesn't seem like it's like there's holes in the stories when he's writing it. But when it's already been written and he's just adapting it, it flows a lot better. So this movie flowed really well, and I love the themes that they came up with. The score was great. I think Trent Reznor and Atticus Ross did the score on this one, so it's a really good movie. It's not nominated for Gotham Award, but it's nominated for Indie Spirit Award. So I'm for Best Feature. So I'm excited to see like if the big players take this on, because that would be really cool to see this movie do that. Timothy was great, obviously. Mark Rylance was whoa. He was insane in this movie. Like this was a great role for him. Like he really killed it. So I hope everyone does go see it. I know it's an indies film. I'm not really sure how people are going to want to go to the theaters and see it, but like it's really good.
And also the fact that it's a love story about two cannibals. Yes, that's kind of a hard sell right there.
You're never the cannibalism is one of the things where you're never gonna get on board with it.
Yeah.
I think they help you understand where it comes from, which I appreciate it. Cause I was like, how are we supposed to, deal with this? And they kind of explain it a little bit. So you'll at least have context for it. Mm-hmm. But if you are just coming to it and you're like, I saw someone else's review when there were like the old people in their theater left.
Yeah.
After some of the scenes, the old people in my theater stayed. So I don't know, maybe those old people weren't into it, but the old people in my theater were into the movie. So I feel good about that. Very good.
Yeah, that's a really hard sell. And I think like what you said before, after watching two other movies with that subject matter, and also our generation, most of the horror movies we grew up with were really psychological. They were more blood, guts, and gore. So the idea of like, oh, I can sit through the cannibal stuff and be fine. Whereas older movie-going audience probably, like, they weren't watching Saw when we were. They're not going to sit down and watch that for long. So,
and it's not that much in there. It's just little bits and bobs. What did you watch, Dale?
Me personally, I watched Devotion. This is a story off the first black naval aviator. It was wonderfully well done. I kind of feel like it's funny that Glenn Powell does Top Gun Maverick, and that he does another movie, which is funny. Like if you go beyond the concept of the movie, the naval unit he joins actually is a naval unit that flew F-14s at some point, and then flies F-18. They fly Top Gun, which military stuff. I just find it funny.
Mm.
Yeah, I do like Jonathan Majors, of course. Since Last Man and all this, has been on a roll with his career. I think people now you know, beyond people of color, are seeing
Mm-hmm.
that he's a star in the making. And Glenn Powell
Mm-hmm.
too. And at the core of this movie, it feels a bit like a better version of Green Book. Where Green Book deviates instead of
Okay.
focusing on Marshala Ali's character, it focuses too heavy on Viggo Mortensen learning about black people and blah blah his experience. Like that movie should not have won Best Picture based on that. But with
Yeah,
this movie,
no.
it kind of does showcase and work. You have a black ensign and a lieutenant and a white lieutenant, and them coming together, coming friends, and him. They're constantly like, look, I'm a black person. I've always had to deal with people following what they do, and I'm always been at the detriment of it. Sometimes you have to go with your gut, and Glenn Powell's character is like, look, sometimes you actually have to follow orders and do what you're told for your safety and stuff like that. And it's two people learning about each other. Like that's why I said it's a much better version, a much better, well done version of Green Book. Because at Green Book, you still see the friction. There is no commonality in a way, but in this movie, you see them grow into a friendship. Like the crux of this movie, of course, the movie title is devotion. And I think that speaks to what the journey of Glenn Powell's character, because it starts with him asking, I joined the military. I joined the military. But for what? Like people ask him, "Are you here for glory? Serve your country?" So that he's like, "I guess I'll find out." And he finds out in this movie like brotherhood, that camaraderie, that thing. And it's funny that it is like I didn't know going in this was a real story on a real person.
Mm.
You've revealed that afterwards, and the movie also mentioned that these two families still remain close to this day. Like if this man, his body was like during the Korean War. His body was like lost in the war. Plane shot down, and crashed, and they couldn't free him, so they had to leave him there. And to this day, they're still trying to recover his body, which is a sad story. Like one of the first, and it's a story you don't hear about. Like it's much
Mm-hmm.
like when uh
Breaking.
not just break what was the movie Cuba Gooding Jr. When he was a naval diver during Pearl Harbor.
Oh.
It's much like
Oh.
yeah, it's much like that. It's like a black man as a first. That's not person we weren't taught in school, that we could do. Like had I known and I love like military shit and point stuff. Had I known about this guy, the first, black naval aviator, I probably would have pushed me more in that direction. Um and like I was mentioning earlier, wonderful movie, amazing movie. Um the issue that they had with this, like even the stunt coordinator from Top Gun Maverick reappears in this. So those aerial scenes are beautifully, they're breathtaking. They said they used practical, all the jets, so like all those the fighters you see in real, they got several of those. They refurbished them, so it's beautifully done. Um, and and I think like just like talking about earlier with a lot of the Thanksgiving release dates, this movie was supposed to release earlier, like September, October, I think. I think pushing it back to Thanksgiving was to a detriment. Um, and also I think the lack of marketing in this movie, like like I mentioned before, Jonathan Majors star on the rise. I think in marketing this movie, they were like Columbia Pictures was really expecting, oh, Jonathan Majors is about to be in Marvel movies for the next 4 or 5 years. He's a star on the rise. People are gonna want to see him before they see him in like Ant-Man, and with Glenn Powell, him being on the rise since Top Gun Maverick. I think they're really banking on the growing star power of both of them, and really failed on the marketing aspect of this film. Had they probably marketed this movie properly, I think it would have probably done a lot better in box office, or you know, potentially pushing this earlier, like make this like a Memorial Weekend release or something like that. Because when I went to go see this movie, I saw a lot of old, like that generation, a lot of older people watching it because they grew up or they were children or whatever during that whole Korean War thing. So I saw a lot of older moviegoers, and I think they really missed the mark on releasing when they did. So, but if you have a chance to watch it, wonderful movie, you'll love it, and you'll feel for Jonathan Majors and his little spiels about dealing with stuff as a black man in the military and coming up. Did you like that clip? Well, you can listen to the entire podcast because the 16mm Film Crew podcast is available on all major podcast platforms.